In the fall of 2024, I headed out to Sarnia for a reception dinner honoring the Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Canada in the province of Ontario. It's about a 2-hour drive from my home in Waterloo. So I brought my wife along. We booked a room at the hotel where the event was being held, and we turned it into our date night for the month. Now, you have to picture the scene. This is a properly formal affair. We're talking black tie for most guests and full white tie dress for the Grand Lodge officers. It's a kind of evening where protocol usually rules the room. While I was mingling at my table, I met a man who immediately stood out. Worshipful Brother Elvis Priestly. He's a cheerful, eccentric Episcopal priest who doesn't just admire Elvis Presley, he impersonates him, even conducting his church services in character. And of course, he's a Mason. During the formal toasts to the Grand Master, a section of the program that is usually very scripted and predictable, Brother Priestly somehow talked the Master of Ceremonies into giving him a minute at the mic. He wasn't on the schedule, but I'm so glad he got up there. What followed was a 5-minute, high-energy animated toast that left the MC looking more and more uncomfortable by the second. But Priestley wasn't done. At the end of his remarks, he pulled out his own Bluetooth speaker, synced it to his phone, and started belting out one of Elvis Presley's hits right there in the ballroom. It was completely unscripted. If the organizers had known what he was planning, it never would have happened. But he pulled it off with such genuine joy that I had to go over and shake his hand afterward. It was the absolute highlight of the night. As I sat back down, I realized, where else on earth could I meet a character like that and treat him as an equal, other than in Freemasonry? That night in Sarnia got me thinking about one of the most beautiful yet underrated aspects of the craft. We talk a lot about meeting on the level, but we rarely stop to consider how difficult that is to achieve in the real world. In our day-to-day lives, we are almost pathologically filtered. Our social media feeds are mirrors. Our neighborhoods are often divided by income, and our friend groups usually consist of people who vote, work, and think exactly like we do. Bringing together an Episcopal Elvis impersonator, a Waterloo businessman, and a high-ranking judge in a single room, not just as acquaintances but as brothers, that doesn't happen organically. It takes an intentional system to break those walls down. The diversity in a Masonic Lodge is so extensive that it almost feels like a glitch in the matrix. On any given night, you're looking at a room full of men from every imaginable age group, educational background, and professional field. You've got spiritual seekers and hard-nosed skeptics, political polar opposites, and guys who have been in the craft for 50, 60, even 70 years, sitting next to 21-year-olds who just joined last Tuesday. It's a kind of mix you just don't find anywhere else. I know I certainly don't find it in my own day job. As a professor, my professional world is pretty predictable. We generally fall into a standard archetype. We're highly intelligent, mostly well-meaning, usually a bit socially awkward, and deathly afraid of telling a joke that might be deemed inappropriate. It's a comfortable world, but it's a very narrow one. Think of it this way. If I were to gather 50 random male professors and put them in a room for a party, I can tell you exactly what would happen. It would be dry. The conversation would stay strictly on work or intellectual theory. Nobody, and I mean nobody, would be dancing. And by 9:45 p.m., the room would start thinning out as everyone looked for their coats so they could be tucked into bed by 10. Now, take 50 random Masons and put them in that same room. The vibe is totally different. In a group of Masons, you're guaranteed to have a brother who moonlights as a DJ and has the perfect playlist ready to go. You'll have a couple of guys who are master electricians or AV techs. They'll have the lights and the sound system humming before the first drink is poured. There will be at least one brother, Likely an older guy you never expect, who will spend half the night breakdancing. And while the professors were heading for the exits before the clock struck 10, the Masons will still be there at 1 a.m. They'll be leaning over the back of the chairs, laughing, sharing stories, and genuinely enjoying the company of men they would have never even met if it weren't for the lodge. That is a magic trick of the craft. We don't just put diverse men in a room. We give them a reason to stay there until they actually become friends. So why can't we just do this at the local pub or a neighborhood barbecue? Why do we need the aprons and the secret handshakes and the rituals? The truth is, modern society has become incredibly efficient at isolating us. There's a famous concept called bowling alone, which points out that while more people are bowling than ever before, they aren't doing it in leagues anymore. We've traded the community hall for the living room couch. We've built a world where you can live next to someone for a decade and might not even know their last name, let alone their deepest convictions. Organically, we're lazy. We gravitate towards what is easy. And what is easy is staying in your own lane. The biggest barrier to genuine connection in the outside world is what I call the jewelry problem. Every day we are constantly scanning each other for status symbols. We look at the car a man drives, the watch on his wrist, the title on his business card, or the neighborhood he lives in. We use this jewelry to decide if someone is our kind of person, or if they're worth our time. It's a subconscious filter that keeps us from ever meeting the Elvis Priestleys of the world. But in the lodge, we have a different kind of jewelry. When a man enters a lodge, he leaves his worldly status at the door. It doesn't matter if he's a CEO or a college student. He wears the same plain white lambskin apron as everyone else. The only jewelry that matters in that room is a collar around a man's neck. And that isn't a sign of wealth, it's a sign of service. It tells you what his job is for the night, not how much is in his bank account. By stripping away the external markers of status, Masonry forces us to look at the man himself. It removes the barriers that society spends billions of dollars trying to build. In the world, we are judged by our stuff. In the lodge, we are judged by our character. That shift is small, but it changes everything. It's a reason an Episcopal Elvis can belt out a tune for a Grand Master and have the whole room, judges, professors, and tradesmen alike, cheering him on. Looking back at that night in Sarnia, I realized that the applause for Worshipful Brother Priestly wasn't just about the music. It was the sound of a mystic tie tightening. In any other ballroom, he might have been seen as a distraction or a curiosity. But in a room full of Masons, he was just a brother who had something to give. And we were the brothers ready to receive it. That mystic tie is more than just a fancy phrase we use in our rituals. It's a real, tangible bond that holds together a group of men who might have absolutely nothing in common except for their shared values and their commitment to becoming better versions of themselves. In a world that is bowling alone, Masonry is building together. It's an intentional, hard-won sanctuary from the filters and the silos that define modern life. We live in a time where people are starving for connection, but are deathly afraid of vulnerability. Masonry solves this by giving us a common language and common set of tools. When you know that every man in the room has taken the same obligations and stands on the same ground, the fear goes away. You can be a professor who admits he doesn't have all the answers, or an Elvis impersonator who just wants to share a song. The world outside can feel like a jagged, uneven place. We're constantly tripping over status, politics, and ego. But inside the lodge, we have the tools to smooth those edges out. We have the square to make our actions right and the level to keep us humble. As I walked back to my room that night, with my wife, she turned to me and said, "That Elvis guy was certainly something else." I couldn't agree more. But the real lesson wasn't the song. It was the fact that a room full of important men in white ties were happy to receive the song. Maybe the world needs a few more squares and a few more levels. Because if we can find a way to meet an Episcopal Elvis on the level, maybe we can find a way to meet our neighbors there too. This is the Brotherly Love Podcast. Let's get to work.